Sometimes as teachers, we meet special challenges. What do we do when students are raised to not ask questions? How then do we engage in inquiry science? In 2021, Ethos is full STEM ahead. Invest in future scientists by supporting our mission. Hello, everybody. This is John Taylor, Director of STEM Education here at Ethos Innovation Center.
And I'm Douglas Hunnings. I am Director of Primary STEM Education here at the ETHOS Innovation Center.
And we do have a really good question here, which is about what do you do when you have those students, and they're shy students, but these are students who are actually raised to not ask questions. So it's a cultural thing. In some families, in some cultures, you're not raised to ask those questions. And so now we're going to engage in inquiry. And do we need questions in inquiry?
We do. That's question. No questions. If we didn't have questions without inquiry without questions, we wouldn't have anything. It's what guides the instruction. So that's a great question that's brought up. Because we want to be sensitive to how the students were raised and the values of their family. But we want those questions to generate to help the students to learn.
Yeah, and we took some time to really think about this, about what we do in a classroom situation. And I think there's a few different approaches. And I think as teachers, what we're suggesting might work for one group of students, but not another. It depends on what part of the country you're in, what part of the world you're in, just on how that happens. So one thought we had was go the engineering route. That sounds like a good way to go. So in a scientific inquiry process, we would do observations. We turn those observations into questions. We work our way into predictions, into hypothesis, and forward. But in an engineering situation, it could be about solving a problem. So we did talk about that. Yeah. So any thoughts on that, Douglas?
Well, with going through the engineering process, they do parallel the engineering process. So you start with engineering, there is a problem they have to solve. So that would be like making an observation and asking a question with the inquiry. So if you would have the students who, were taught not to ask questions in the class, you could just have them look at the problem and determine the problem that people are trying to solve. So by looking at the problem, the students would create the question. Now they're not questioning the teacher,
right? Which
a lot of times they're taught not to ask questions because they're taught you don't question the teacher's authority. You don't ask them a question. You listen to what they say and you take that as the answer. If they're just telling the problem, they're not really asking the question. So that's a way to help them start discovering learning, where they're starting to dig deeper into what's going on, but yet still obeying and responding to their parents' expectations.
Right. I think this is a time where it's good to give them a scenario that is flawed. It's obvious it's flawed. It's not going to work as it is. And so you ask the kids, what can we do to improve this? And what we're doing now is we're questioning the process. Like you're saying, we're not questioning the authority of the adult. What we're questioning is what is the thing that's detached from the teacher. And so, I love setting this up in a classroom. I love to have demos that would go wrong. And, they always say when you have a demo in front of a class, you want to practice, make sure it goes well because you don't want anything to go bad. And I think, and I learned just to embrace those. It's great to have a demo. You got that cart going down that ramp and you let go and the dumb thing doesn't move. And you're like, what happened? And it's great. You can play it off that is like, you're surprised too, but you're like the kids, what went wrong here? And now we're questioning. Now we're doing, indirectly, we're doing it, but it's questioning.
So I think so using the engineering process is a great way. And what's really cool with the inquiry method and the processes that we go through, they really parallel. The students are doing almost the exact same thing. We just call it a different word.
Yes.
Asking questions is determining the problem. Creating a hypothesis is determining the solution. So presenting it in a way like it's as an engineer thinks, I think that's a great strategy to help encourage those students who don't ask questions, because not that they don't want to, but that they were taught not to. That's a great way to really help them still think like a scientist, to think with that inquiry mind.
Right. And then how important it is to communicate our significant findings now, because they just fix the problem we had in the classroom that we can't figure out, and that we can move forward. All right. Well, it seems like hopefully that's helpful. I think that's a good approach. And there's a lot more thoughts to this too, a lot more discussion I think we could have. And I think it's one of those things where as teachers, it's good to remember we're teaching a process to the kids about how to think, and that we have payoff dividends down the road by modeling this technique.
And I think even though our focus kind of was, or the question was stemming from students who were taught not to question, this strategy can even help with those students who are just resistant to asking. They just don't want to, or they don't know how. Getting them to ask those questions through the engineering process would be a way to get those shyer students to start talking.
Yeah, and we got to kind of think back, because I was a shy kid, and I remember those shy kids. Is you're on the edge of your seat because everything inside of you is keeping you from asking a question, but you really, 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 really want to. And you got to remember, teachers, even though they seem quiet, they're not asking. They really, really, really want to, and that's maybe we're small groups or trying different types of learning styles with them, where maybe they're expressing it kinesthetically, maybe they're expressing it verbally or not. Maybe it's written, maybe it's through illustration and art. There's a lot of different ways that they can express themselves to start getting this process that they're comfortable with asking questions in their own way.
And I love the idea that you brought up, to remember that, because sometimes these students can be seen as being disengaged and not really wanting to do it, but really, like I said, they're just holding back. So engineering, putting them in small groups, like you mentioned, those are all great ways to really get that engagement piece going, because once students are engaged, we've got them hooked.
Yes. Yep. Very much so.
Well, great. Well, that was a great question.
Very good. And thanks everybody for joining us today, and have a great time in your classroom.
And we'll see you next time.